Support for this episode of Trifles is brought to you by the Baker Street Journal, the leading publication of Sherlock Holmes scholarship since 1946. Find them online at bakerstreetirregulars.com. And by listeners like you who choose to support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Find out more at patreon.com/trifles. Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the stone was Mazarin, the carbuncle was blue, and the mane was lion, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder about what kind of chemistry experiments Sherlock Holmes was running? Or what a yeggman is? Or why Holmes's index was sorted haphazardly?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Bert Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 365. Oh my. Hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we look into the details of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, you know, I always say, oh my, when I'm in your presence. Oh my.
Oh my.
Oh my.
That's probably what Holmes said when he saw his brother all the time.
Oh my.
Oh my.
Oh sure.
Oh sure.
That's it. It was a whole bit they did over the dinner table. I'm sure their parents got really sick of it.
That's right.
Oh my. Oh sure. See. See. Well, this is going to be a banner episode. It is our final episode of Season 7 here in 2023.
Hooray!
Yes, everyone is celebrating, especially our listeners, I'm sure. And this does mark our 365th episode of Trifles. As we've said before, we now will supply you with enough trifles to listen to a Sherlock Holmes podcast every single day for the whole year. But unfortunately, 2024 is a leap year, so that means there's 366 days. So I guess, Bert, we have to keep recording.
Oh, I don't think we have any choice. No, it's absolutely right.
And if you're wondering if we ran out of topics, well, this episode should disabuse you of that notion. Or maybe reinforce that notion. We shall see. And if you are among the lucky listeners who have submitted what you think is the correct guess for the title of this episode, then we have a little something for you. So we will be in touch if you have emailed us. And if you would like to email us about anything, really, we are trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. You can send in suggestions for an episode, and if you do, in fact, hear your episode on the air, we will send you a prize from the iHo's, or I should say from the Trifles vaults. We share space with I Hear of Sherlock everywhere, so we'll have to make sure we don't take any of their prizes.
No.
I know, right? And we're also looking at our tiers of thank you gifts over on Patreon. There's been a little hiccup there in terms of some of the execution of the gifts going out. I hope that we have addressed that and rejiggered the system. So please be patient with us. And in the year ahead, we'll also be offering some opportunities for people to do one-off purchases on Patreon. If you don't feel like supporting the show overall, we will have some digital offerings that you can get on a one-off basis, special episodes, things like that. So stay tuned for that. It'll be something to look forward to in the new year. And again, the website there is patreon.com/trifles. And of course, you can always find our show notes and all of our archives at SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Well, this is the Oh My episode. The reason it's Oh My, it owes a nod to a trick that Alfred Hitchcock pulled over 3 successive movies. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's a long game that he played in terms of making sure his fans were paying attention. You know how Alfred Hitchcock, Bert, had a cameo in every movie?
Yes, yes.
And that became the big thing. You searched for Alfred Hitchcock in his movies, whether it was him, missing the bus in New York City in the opening of North by Northwest, or, I think the real clever one was in Lifeboat. There were what, 6 or 7 people, I think, in a lifeboat, and that's how the film spent its time, was in this lifeboat with the survivors of a ship disaster. People wondered how Hitchcock would appear. Well, it turns out he was in a weight loss ad in a newspaper that was in the boat. So they got that in there. But in terms of why we're talking about Hitchcock and not Sherlock Holmes, and we will get to Holmes, from the movie Spellbound in 1945 to the movie The Paradigm Case in 1947, and finally to the movie Strangers on a Train, he had 3 successive appearances that were all connected. In the first, he exited an elevator carrying a violin case. In the second, he was outside of a train station holding a cello. And then in the third, he was patiently waiting for a passenger to disembark from a train before hoisting a double bass up the stairs onto the train. So he had violin, cello, double bass over 6 years. That's what you call a commitment to the craft. Well, similarly here, if you were paying attention, we started with, I think it was a mention of, lions in September in episode 352. And we've done episodes about animals before, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we talked about where lions happened to appear in the canon. And then in October, we got to tigers. And in November, we got to bears. Now, if anyone is familiar with the 1939 classic, The Wizard of Oz, you'll know that they chanted together lions and tigers and bears. And here we are at the final episode of the season. Oh, my. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh, my. So, all of this is to say, this is our celebration of 365 episodes. And, maybe we should step back in time here, Bert, and reminisce about what it is that got us to do this silly little show in the first place.
What was it that got us to do this silly little show in the first place?
I think it was a hallucination of some sort. There was alcohol involved. We were completely out of our minds.
No, there wasn't. I think, like the Magic 8 Ball, my memory is clouding. Ask again.
Well, I'll give you a good shake. I think it came just kind of observing some of the questions, comments, and suggestions from listeners of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Maybe even some comments on our Apple podcast reviews where people were surprised to find this show that was an interview show, like Fresh Air meets Car Talk for Sherlockians, and they wanted to hear more about the stories. They wanted to hear discussions about the stories. And I was looking through every year at the BSI dinner, at the Baker Street Irregulars dinner, there are handouts. There's a giveaway packet. And a fellow by the name of William Hyder, Bill Hyder from Baltimore, for years has put in a little half sheet. I'm sorry?
Bless him.
Bless him. Has put in a little half sheet where he says it's titled Trifles, and it's just a couple of paragraphs of him musing about some trifle in the canon. I thought, well, that's a great concept for a show. And if we could take that and do a shorter show than our hour-long interviews, then it might be something that would be appealing. And here we are.
Yeah, well, I think that's well remembered. You're right. Now that I think about it, it was basically feedback or commentary that we'd heard, which was basically, hey, what about the actual stories? And the idea that shorter and weekly would be a great way to do that. And I think it was a terrific idea.
It sounds great in concept, doesn't it?
Well, I think it sounds great in execution, too. I mean, for me, it's a treat to be able to regularly spend, some minutes during the week with you talking about the specifics of Sherlock Holmes and his world. And eventually we evolved into the idea of, within the distribution of shows across the quarters, across the months, that every month perhaps we should have some recurring features. And so, in particular, it occurred to us that we would do master's class, that of all the people who'd written commentaries about the world of Sherlock Holmes, that there were people today who wanted to participate in that game, in the grand game, but might be uncertain about what's gone before and how to do it. And so, we came up with the idea of picking 4 notables. And, during the course of a quarter, January, February, March, 3 examples, one a month, of a particular memorable or great essay. And so this year we were able to do Trevor Hall in the first 3 months of the year, 2023, followed by Edgar Smith, followed by Michael Harrison, and followed by Christopher Morley. And that in particular, I think, has been a lot of fun.
It really has. And I think, we've heard from some listeners, and we'd be delighted to hear from you if you have an opinion on this. Again, our email is trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. It began out of season 4 when we started with a series we called Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the Theorist, where we took a piece of scholarship and we discussed it, its merits, its arguments, etc. And I think it was season 6 we developed it into master's class. That was particularly your brainstorm there, where you said, let's look at the real exemplary stuff, the stuff that still shines after all these years, and just hold it out there to highlight it. So, and I think this is interesting because so many of the Sherlockians that have gone before us have talked about things, have talked about these trifling issues in different ways. And this is the beauty of our little hobby, is that we're able to take something that appeals to us and expand upon it and make it our own. So even going back and looking at these masterful essays, it's our chance to critique them. It's our chance to revisit them. It's our chance to celebrate them once again with people who may not have even heard of these people, or B, may not have had access to some of these publications where you can read these original pieces of scholarship.
And it's nice to revisit them and also take a bit of a critical eye or an analytical eye to them, to see how they develop their arguments and to ask at the end, so are you persuaded, by this particular point of view?
Yeah.
And the good news is that we don't get too far away from the fun of it. It really, fun is a constant theme in all of this in one way or another.
Yeah, well, one would hope. I mean, as soon as we stop having fun, then, the game is over. And I guess that's part of the reason we call it the Great Game. When we started this little venture nearly 7 years ago, actually our first episode dropped on January 4th, 2017. The topic was optimism. And we used New Year's as the hook for starting our discussion with all you Sherlockians out there about Trifles. And I think optimism is something that still is I think, a recurring theme here. Vincent Sterrett, in his poem 221B, talked about how, hear the world explode. That is, the world around us is always in turmoil. But we still have great hope. Just as Sherlock Holmes in the Naval Treaty mentioned flowers, having great hope for something with something as simple as a flower. And it's a great reminder that we've got this common theme running throughout all of our lives here, that we all enjoy Sherlock Holmes and the relationship that he and Watson had, and the fun that it brings us to come in contact with each other and have some of these discussions.
Yeah.
So, we had picked out in that first season certain holidays that were occurring during the month. So we tried to do an episode associated with them: Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and Ash Wednesday and Easter and Mother's Day and Father's Day and on and on. And then I think it was when we got into season 2, we decided to put a little more structure around this and to have these predictable recurring themes month after month. And that's when we did our first 2 recurring themes. Do you remember what the recurring themes for season 2 were, Bert?
Yes, you're right. I don't remember.
I knew I could count on you.
Yes.
The first was called Inside 221B, where we decided to take a step into Holmes and Watson's sitting room and look around a little bit and remark on some of the items that are mentioned either by Watson or perhaps even visually through Sidney Paget, Frederick Dorr Steele, or even in some of the productions over the years. So we looked at the sideboard. We looked at the things that hang on the wall. We looked at the Gasogene and Tantalus, the chemistry set, Holmes's pipes, the Morocco case that holds his syringe, things like that.
Yeah. Destructive habits.
That could be
patriotic VR, the jackknife in the mantle. What else did Holmes do to mess up Mrs. Hudson's room? And then, of course, the wax bust. And you mentioned the Morocco case, the Stradivarius. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tottenham Court Road for 55 shillings. It was pointed out to me, by the way, today that in Andrew Lycett's book that we discussed on our I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, that because of an error in proofreading, that appears to be attributed to 45 shillings and a different road.
Oh, dear.
How about that?
Oh, quality control.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And then we did seating in October of that year, basket chairs and so on, and the gramophone.
Oh,
that was a
yeah.
lovely thing. And then what was on the floor? The bearskin rug, the hearth rug, the carpet.
Lovely.
Quite a year of inventory.
It was. And that was the same year we also looked at unpublished cases. And we tried to go beyond just the singular cases, although there are some that are worthy of note, like James Phillimore, who disappeared after stepping back inside to look for his umbrella. The Amateur Mendicant Society. But then we looked at the Abernethy family. We looked at some groupings. We looked at the various entries in the index under the letter V that were mentioned in the Sussex Vampire. We looked at weird animals that were named in the unpublished cases. The giant rat of Sumatra, of course. The remarkable worm unknown to science. The repulsive story of the red leech. So there were many to choose from there, and we had fun going through some of those significant and familiar unpublished cases.
Well, and then in the next year, in season 3, we didn't have that many repeating categories.
We had 2.
Didn't we?
In season 3, yeah. If you go into the spreadsheet,
I'm looking at it.
We did sports and games.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
That was a big one.
Everything international.
From board games to playing cards, golf, billiards, and I think we wrapped it up that year looking at an article that William S. Baring-Gould wrote for Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, that was fun.
Which was called Sherlock Holmes Sportsman. That was our final episode of that season. It was a lot of fun, as you say.
May 1963, Sports Illustrated. Yeah, what a great story that was.
Yeah.
And then the other theme for that year was international. So we stepped through all of Holmes's international connections, South Americans, the French, Australians, and Sherlock Holmes, the Irish, and Sherlock Holmes. That really is a whole different lens on the cases and experiences of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, there's a lot there when we began to peel it back.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll continue talking about some of these categories and, more importantly, where you can find them. So stay with us.
When you're looking for reference material regarding the Sherlock Holmes stories, the Baker Street Journal has been providing thoughtful articles since 1946. The topics range from the trifling to deep conundrums, but they all center around Sherlockian scholarship. And maybe you've been subscribing for years, or maybe you have yet to subscribe. But there's one resource that can make your research easier to do: the EBSJ. The EBSJ is an electronic copy of all the back issues of the Baker Street Journal from its inception in 1946 through 2011 in PDF format. That's 276 issues with more than 18,000 pages, spanning the old series to the new series, the Christmas annuals, all the way through 2011. It's entirely searchable, so you can find what you need in just seconds. Check out the EBSJ on BakerStreetIrregulars.com today.
Okay, we're back, categorically speaking. And we are up to season 4. We're just kind of reminiscing about some of the groupings of episodes. And, of course, there are plenty of one-off episodes where we talked about, various things. But we do have recurring themes in each month that we just decided to create these categories for ourselves, just to create maybe a little sanity. And to help ourselves just think about how we can divide up some of the many, many things that we see in the canon. So moving into season 4, we had a wonderful food series, actually, which I feel like we were, by the time we got to the end of that season, were we really scraping the bottom of the pot for food? I don't know.
Scraping our plates.
We didn't. I don't think that made it all the way through the.
No.
Through the
well,
year,
we had
did it?
Victorian food, and we had British food and Victorian vegetarian food.
Yeah,
but that was kind of
I think that was it. That was just a twofer there.
But then that year we had Mr. Sherlock Holmes the Theorist, as you pointed out. And that got us into Watson Was a Woman by Rex Stout.
Oh, right.
And Watson's Second Wound by James Keddy, and a whole number of things. Stories about working women, ladies of title, the victims, the location of 221B. That was a big deal.
Billy the Page Boy. He was a good one. The historicity of Sherlock Holmes as an actual historic figure. So yeah, there was a lot there, and that then in season 5, I think. No, we discontinued it that year, didn't we? We just talked about animals. over the course of season 5, which this was a wonderful discovery. And I've heard from more than one listener who went out after hearing our discussion about, I think it was about animals, or was it? Yeah, it must have been. Because our source for animals and things related to nature in the canon is a lovely series by Don Jewell.
Donald Gerard Jewell.
Yeah, it's
who is, by the way, still living and no longer interested in Sherlock Holmes.
Oh dear. Well, I mean, good. I'm glad he's living, but I didn't mean to say I was disappointed, but that he's no longer interested. I guess, putting together a series like that probably took a lot out of him.
Well, I think his interests, and enthusiasms have moved on, and we've offered, in fact, to reprint his 9-volume. I think it's
Natural History series. Is that what it is?
The Natural History series. Yeah. To arrange to get that reprinted in various forms, but he's really not interested in that, sadly. And I'm still looking for horses and snakes, I remember.
Okay.
I've got the rest of them, though.
All right. Well, stay on the lookout. We'll do our best to keep the lookout there. But we wanted to, I think we were looking at unusual animals. It wasn't that we were just going through all the animals mentioned in the canon. In season 5, because we looked at langur and the cheetah and baboon,
mongoose.
Teddy the mongoose, right?
Yep.
The wiper or viper in a couple of the stories. Cormorants, lab rats, jellyfish, beetles, butterflies, British birds, and reptiles and amphibians. Yeah. Which was inspired by Don Jewell's The Herpetological Holmes, which is volume 8. So then we round the corner to season 6, and we have dueling scholarship in season 6. We brought back Mr. Sherlock Holmes the Theorist, and we introduced the master's class, thanks to you.
Yeah, that was, excuse me, a lot of fun.
And we had other topics in the midst there. We talked about the best Sherlock Holmes stories. Talked about British monarchs, which was fun. It was a little bit of a quiz for us to figure out which British monarchs were mentioned, either explicitly or kind of sideways. That was a lot of fun. Oh, we did, that was the year, episode 300, we did Langurton, which was the spoof pharmaceutical ad for what Professor Presbury was taking in The Creeping Man.
Yep. Yeah, and it gave us the opportunity during the year, particularly in master's class, to revisit some of Nick Utekin's essays, which were really fabulous.
Yeah, he talked about just how Holmes had reacted to Watson not being there in the Boscombe Valley mystery initially. Obviously, he got him to come along.
And we had one of the best papers in July of 2022. We did in master's class Isaac Asimov's paper about the dynamics of an asteroid.
Oh, yeah. Always a good one. So, and then here we are, season 7. So we've had monthly observances here, where each month we kind of pick out. There's always one of these international something day or week or month. So we decided to use that as inspiration. We had various discussions there, weddings and mentors and hand washing and sleep awareness and gardens, eggs. It was National Egg Month in May. So we had a lot of fun with that. And then we actually touched this season on a few sensitive topics. And we got many compliments from our listeners on the way we handled them. alcoholism being one of them, suicide being another. And I think it was a great reminder at how realistic the canon has always been, how close to the human experience Conan Doyle made it, and which is part of the magic. You know, these aren't fanciful, erstwhile stories that have happened in another world. These are very much part of the human experience.
Yeah, that's very well said, part of the human experience. Now, when we talk about many of the incidents in the world of Sherlock Holmes and his character and characteristics, you can't help but touch on features and facts that some of our colleagues in the human race are very sensitive to and that represent, significant issues for them. And recognizing that fact and not just sort of waving your hand and blowing past it, I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, we also touched on what we call terrible human tragedies, which, there were a number of stories that touched on that, just dealing with grief and loss. Talked about animal cruelty, which, in some cases was a fact of life in that era, but it didn't have to be either. So, it's interesting now looking back at the season and this, the completeness of the 52 episodes that we did this year. I didn't realize how deep some of these were.
Anybody would think that there was an editor somehow involved in this. But, it really is like putting together a magazine. I mean, this is, there's a significant editorial function here. However, casually it happens to occur.
Yeah. Well, I guess
and look at the range. I mean, we talk regularly about things that pertain to the Victorian age writ large, the culture, their habits. So in addition to the popular culture in Sherlock Holmes, which we do on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, many times we delve into Victorian popular culture and what those issues were and how people spoke and what they did and the way they treated animals and their view of the world and things like that. So
it's a lot.
It is. It's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
I think for our list, what we need to pursue is awarding continuing education credits for listeners. If you've gone through 365 episodes of Trifles, you should get some kind of credit recognition for something.
You really should. A Purple Heart, hazard pay, something.
Purple dressing gown.
There you go. A purple dressing gown in the form of a heart. I like that. You could do a lot with it. Well, by way of showing our appreciation, and again, I mentioned our Patreon supporters. Thank you for your support. Please be patient with us as we figure out the gift tiers. But as you know, all of our Patreon supporters are eligible to participate in a drawing every month for a free back issue of the Baker Street Journal and another drawing every quarter for a free annual subscription to the Baker Street Journal. And this is that episode. This is where that happens. So I guess it is incumbent upon me to give the prize wheel a big spin. There you go. And it lands on number 45. And again, this is for a back issue of the Baker Street Journal, and it looks like that goes to Bill Singos. Hey, Bill, congratulations. We'll be getting a copy of that to you. Hopefully we'll see you in Boston. And now the big drawing for the no, not the quarterly. Well, it is a quarterly drawing, but it is for a year subscription to the Baker Street Journal. Let's give the prize wheel another spin. Extra hard this time. That's the big prize. Number 32, and it looks like that is... will you look at this? It's Curtis Armstrong.
Curtis Armstrong! Hooray!
Our pal Curtis, now in the New York area. So we will put your name on the list for a free annual subscription. Thank you so much, Curtis. Well, Bert, as we round the corner now to season 8, what are your, we talked in the first episode ever about optimism. So what are your hopes for this next year of Sherlockian discourse?
My hope is that we can get to my previously undiscussed favorite hidden topic in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
What?
Clothespins.
Well, we talked about clothing, so there's got to be some mention of pins. I know there's hairpins, but
no, that's not good
we'll
to do it.
We'll have to study that.
Yeah.
Well, my hope would be that we get some audience participation.
Yes.
If you want to suggest an episode that we haven't yet done, something perhaps that's been bugging you, something that irks you, something that's trifling, and we would be delighted to receive your recommendation. Again, just email us at trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. And to make it a little easier, I think what we are going to do is we're going to put an index together for our Patreon supporters, or make it available as a one-off, as I said we would, as a handy guide to Trifles episodes. I mean, we mentioned all of these categories, all of these various episodes, but that fades from memory. So maybe committing it to writing in some format may be helpful. If that sounds like something you would like us to do, let us know. Leave a comment or send us an email.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I guess this is just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
You know my method. It is founded upon the observance of trifles.